Hello and welcome to the Window Gallery for Invented Instruments Virtual Artist Talk Series. I'm David Samus and I curate this space along with Bart Hopkins and Kirk Pearson. As a result of California's reopening, we are now open for in-person events and exhibitions. The Window Gallery itself is open from 9 to 5 Mondays through Fridays, and the Center for New Music is available to have both streaming and in-person concerts. So go ahead and reach out to them through their website, centerfornewmusic.com. I'm really excited to say that Norman Tuck's show that opens in July 1st, is going to have an actual in-person opening, and that will be July 22nd at 6 p.m. at the Center for New Music. This will be our first event together in over a year. It'll be really exciting to see everybody. Thank you all for your patience and perseverance, and it's going to be really incredible to be together again. In the months following that, Kirk Pearson is putting together a show called Reimagining the Tape Cassette, which is going to be a show of interesting historical tape loops from around the world that you'll be able to play and interact with, and other instruments that work with cassette. Although tonight what we're here for is a virtual artist talk with Marielle Jacobson about her incredible virtual exhibition, Mirrors of Light. And she'll be talking today with Bart Hopkins and exploring some of the themes of the show. If you haven't seen the virtual show yet, you can see it at the centerfornewmusic.com, and you can just follow the link to the gallery page, and that's where it'll be. And without further ado, I am very pleased to announce this artist's conversation between Bart Hopkins and Marielle Jacobson. Welcome back, everybody.
Hi, I'm Marielle, and I'm going to show you a little bit about the technology and setup that went into creating the piece Mirror of Light. First of all of the motion that you're seeing visually is created from the exact sounds that you're hearing. These cymatic water waves are instigated by sound and then reflect and refract light and color. This light is then captured at different photographic scales from the microscopic to macroscopic to something that's visible with the naked eye. First, let's talk about where all the magic happens in the vessel. For this piece, I selected a glass vessel because I wanted to work with caustics as well as cymatics, which is actually reflecting and refracting the light through glass into the water and back out onto the glass or onto the wall. This vessel is suspended from the ceiling with fishing line, and it has a sound driver on the bottom and a small amount of water inside of it. I tried several different vessels before settling on this one for the piece, and the reason is that this particular vessel has a particular characteristic as to how it sounds, how sounds travels through it, and what pitches and frequencies activate it or make the sound actually stop moving completely. So the resonant frequency of this vessel happened to be very close to the resonant frequency of these singing bowls behind me, which I wanted to use in the piece as well. A lot of the sounds that you're hearing are coming from the Yamaha YC30 vintage organ. And this organ was selected in part because it has a pitch knob here, which allows me to correct from concert pitch to a little bit sharp in order to match the frequencies that activate this particular vessel. Also, this instrument, because it's almost like an analog synthesizer, it has a lot of modulations and analog characteristics that create nonlinearities in the sound, which create more interesting patterns even while holding a single pitch. You'll also hear this semblance synthesizer by Analog Solutions. I love the filter and modulation on this, but also it has knobs which are really helpful for fine-tuning frequencies that are going into the vessel to create specific motion patterns. Also featured in this piece are crystal singing bowls, which aren't any sort of standard tuning. And this steel drum is tunable, and it's been tuned so that it has close matching and some fun microtonal explorations with the singing bowls. And this is fun because inside here there are magnets which you can move in order to create the exact frequency. Now, all this talk about frequencies and pitches, this piece was really created from the inside out, starting with the vessel and an idea of how to activate it with sound. All of the tonalities are really built upon what is the natural physical characteristics of this particular vessel. These close beating patterns of the different instruments together with standard and non-standard tunings and they create the cymatic beauty because microtones create movement. If you have a very perfectly tuned frequency, it creates a certain motion, but that motion is almost like a static pattern in a way. Once you start adding these beating frequencies, they create much more complex patterns, which are something that I'm very interested in exploring in this work. Let's take a quick look at the lighting. We have here some LED spotlights, which the color can actually be controlled from Bluetooth. There's an app for that. So I can actually control the color and the movement of the lights from my phone while recording the piece so that it can be reactive to the sounds that you're hearing. Also, while recording, I can move these because they're mobile. And the other big lighting element here is this LED strip, which is also programmable. And it is mounted onto this hinge here so that I can control the angle very precisely of how the lights are hitting the water. The other light source that you're seeing is coming from the microscope. And I made a little homemade gel color for the microscope light. The microscope. So this body of work I've been exploring from the macro perspective. I've really wanted to explore closer and closer, deeper into the water waves, and this has been really fun for me to get a microscope. Now that technology has caught up so that an affordable microscope can actually record in 1080 high definition video. And so exploring with this unit has been very fun. And I'm still using my trusty Canon 60D setup for the macroscopic shots, which are a little bit farther away than the microscope, which is just within a few centimeters. This Canon 60D is mounted on these macro bellows, and it's using a telephoto lens. The telephoto lens has a focal length of several feet actually, but when you combine it with the macro bellows, it's actually taken down to an inch or two. Well, thanks for watching, and thanks to everyone at the Center for New Music Window Gallery for their support in this exhibition.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this presentation of the Window Gallery at the Center for New Music in San Francisco. Today, we're going to be talking with Marielle Jacobsons. Marielle is a composer, a recording artist, an instrumentalist playing flutes, keyboards, violins, and who knows what else, hand pans and whatever else. There's lots of really wonderful stuff that Marielle does, but today we're going to be focusing on one particular thing, which is the macro-cymatic musical instrument that you've just been seeing in these recordings. So let me just say to start, Marielle, welcome. How are you doing today?
Hi, Bart. Thank you. I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me. It's really great to chat with you.
It's our pleasure, and it's our pleasure in all ways except one, which is that we're still not doing live shows, and this one would have been wonderful live. Although I have to say, if it had been live, it would have been very different from what we're seeing here. So that's kind of
Absolutely.
speculative. but what this work has to offer live is wonderful. It also works very well as pre-recorded video. It happens to fit the filmmaker's aesthetic nicely, so we're lucky in that way.
Thank
And we're
you.
lucky also that you've done some wonderful work creating something that we can present today.
Oh, well, thanks for the support. I appreciate the opportunity to explore a new dimension to this work and for, for us to be able to still do this in the time of COVID, because as a gallery space, there was kind of one idea that we had of how this piece would take shape. And now 1 year later, it's taken another shape, but still inspired by that thread and that support that you've been offering. And so instead of an installation, now we have this fixed media piece, and we have this studio basement set up instead of a immersive installation in the window gallery. But this is right. This is life. We're all adapting, and
Right.
and you know, so it's always fun though to think about the evolution of the piece. It might not be something that everyone is aware of.
That's right. That's right. That's right. So the central instrument here is the microcymatic visual music instrument. We got this word cymatic. What does that word mean for you?
For me, it means, well, I primarily work with water with cymatics. And so for me, it has to do with fluid motion generated by sound. And when I'm working with cymatics, which is basically wave patterns and how waves are propagated through mediums, when looking at that from the perspective of how sound moves water, then we're looking at these kind of visual music instruments, which are translating sounds into motion of water, which then gets light refracts off of it and refracts. Using this glass instrument, you also get caustics, which is how the light waves are being reflected and refracted through multiple layers of materials. And then you get to how you see it and at what perspective you see it. So that gets to the macrocymatic portion, macro and micro, with the newest addition to my arsenal over here, this little microscope.
Yes. Okay. So this word cymatic, it has a history. There was one guy in particular who sort of popularized the word and all this stuff. And mostly what it means in a broader culture is efforts to make physical audible waveforms visible in all kinds of ways. And it turns out that water is a wonderful medium for this. And then Marielle, you have brought it forward in water in these wonderful ways we've just been seeing.
Absolutely. And must give a big shout out to Hans Jenny and his work with cymatics, which was a huge inspiration for me to get started in this world. I was like, that's what water looks like from the inside. That's what, 56 hertz looks like. And it comes from this desire of creating a physical relationship to the sound. And as an instrumentalist, as a violinist, I feel the vibrations always coming through inside my body, but do also the listeners feel that vibration, maybe not the same way. How can we create an experience where viewers and listeners can also have this physical relationship to the sound?
Yeah, wonderful. And so what we've seen today is a culmination of a decade or so of work, I think, something like that. Anyway, there's a history to this thing. Where did this begin? Your work in this area of water and light and sound.
Well, it did begin while I was getting my MFA at Mills College, and I was studying with Pauline Oliveros and Maggie Payne and Chris Brown and Les Stuck, the really wonderful crew there, and exploring how to build environments, how to build what I called breathing systems, where I wanted to create an environment that you could enter into and have a full experience of the sound with all your senses, with light, to experience the physicality of the sound, as well as to, of course, hear it. And that's when actually the first macrocymatic instrument, in a way, it wasn't actually, it was just cymatic, it was this beautiful pan with this audio driver on the back. And my thesis performance had 3 of these pans with spotlights reflecting the water onto this theater. And that's really where my inspiration of cymatics started. And then I started to think about, I was very fascinated by how those looked at a closer up scale. And I was like, how can I get closer to being inside the water so that you stop thinking of it as water and you really just start thinking about it as motion and light and having that more synesthetic and more abstract experience. And that's when I started crafting these macrocymatic instruments. And actually at the Drescher residency, I crafted this one, which is made of a cedar top. And this is actually a string. It might be a little hard to see here. It has a bridge. I couldn't find the bridge today, but the water goes into this little area right here. And it has an audio driver underneath it. And also it has a microphone hookup. So this is actually, in a way, an instrument that both produces the sound in a feedback loop, as well as creating the visuals and the motion of the sound. What I realized later, though, was having a string instrument on the macrocymatic instrument was a little hard for performance, because when at macro scale, the tiniest little movement, like me just touching this like this, is gonna, like the whole boat's gonna rock because you're so close up. So trying to bow something, you know, it was a fun idea to explore. And that instrument created some really beautiful visuals.
Maria, let me just back up. So
sure.
have this, it's a beautiful thing. I don't know who made it. Did you make it? Did you do the woodwork and all that kind of stuff?
Oh yeah.
Wonderful. And
yeah.
So you have the single string, which you played with a bow, and of course you have violin chops, so that was nice. And then there's some kind of pickup on it, or microphone or something. And then there's also, you said, a feedback loop, meaning there's some kind of driver, which is driving the string or driving the wood, or what?
Driving the wood. Yeah, exactly. So there's actually, this one has stereo audio drivers underneath the area, that kind of teardrop shaped area that's carved out of the wood. Has two stereo drivers to create that beating pattern motion directly on the surface of the water through the wood.
If you're listening to it, you hear the live sound of the wood, which is made louder by the fact that you've got this sort of EBow type situation, driving it, making it louder. Is that all correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, since it's cedar and it's wood, of course it has its own resonant characteristics.
Yes, wonderful.
Right, and so it and of course the pitches that I'm using are going to be related to that natural resonance of the instrument.
Yes.
Because that's how can I move the water if that piece of wood isn't activated and moving within it.
Okay, and then you had a similar kind of light reflecting system or something like that. Okay, yeah, that's beautiful. The idea of, I mean, what you're doing now is wonderful in a certain way. What you were doing then is beautiful in the fact that it's as integrated as it is. You know, it's all one physical system working together, and we're hearing the acoustic sound and all of those things. That sounds really nice. Okay, let us continue with the history.
Oh, sure. And then the next version of the instrument that I made at Jurassic, which is casted resin, unfortunately, which is turning a little bit yellow now. That's one of the reasons why I'm not using the casted resin anymore. It was clear before, but this had also this kind of integrated lighting and the audio driver within it. And this was an attempt as well to kind of stabilize the system. The wood is beautiful and has a wonderful, wonderful tone, but it is a little bit more finicky and unstable. So if I'm going to be taking it out, also it really is particular about its tonality because it's wood and it's going to have its specific resonance. When I'm using this casted resin, it actually would allow me to use more frequencies and more different frequency relationships to activate the water in the area in the middle. And so that was kind of the design for this particular version of the instrument. And I ended up using this to create an entire album worth of material StarCore, which I performed with the cymatic visuals that were created on this instrument here. And one fun note about this is that this camera setup right here to do these macrocymatic visuals, I'm kind of lucky that it works. If I had tried to actually calculate all of the focal lengths and how they would work out, I would have never thought that this setup would work. Everything that you look at about this, it shouldn't work, but somehow it does. Using this telephoto lens with this long macro bellows, somehow, oops. That wouldn't be the first time that happened while I was recording. It's a little top heavy. Just part of it saying I might be a little tenuous, but it somehow it works out. Okay, everyone's all right. A little water spillage, I can tell you that's we've seen plenty of that on
Water spillage? Okay.
Oh yeah. It's working within a super tight space, right? And so like, you know, everything, and of course if you actually stimulate it too much, the water starts spilling out of the vessel as well. So, you know, there's always going to be some water getting around the electronics.
And I don't know if there were a bunch more intermediate steps, or are we now close to what? Now, I should say that the viewers have seen your walkthrough of how the current instrument works, right? Are we just about there, or are there a bunch more intermediate steps?
Yeah, well, there were some, but I think that was kind of, you know, at least it gives you a bit of a history of how the instrument has evolved. And I think for this particular incarnation, the driving questions for me were, one, can I use glass? I've been wanting to use glass for a really long time. This was a step towards it where I could actually get the light to come from underneath it. But as you can see, this is still somewhat opaque. I can't get a very clear reflection of the water coming up underneath and, for example, reflecting onto a wall. And I really wanted to have that experience and to work with glass. And so this teardrop was the winning found object for the next
wonderful.
Instrument.
The teardrop is wonderful. Okay, so one thing I like about that little bit of history is sort of it illustrates the question of the physicality of the whole thing, and the handmade stuff versus the technology, how those balance out between what went before and what's going now. I wanted to ask you, what's your thinking about scale and frequency and relationships between frequencies? How does that play out as you're working with this instrument? Are you using particular types of scales?
Absolutely. And so each of the materials has a different way that resonance. So resonance, of course, is what frequency does an object ring at? What sound makes this object come alive? And when we're talking about cymatics, you definitely want to be working within, you want to be conscious of how different frequencies affect the motion of the water. And that means how they are in relationship to the physical aspects of the instrument. And because we're dealing with the physical aspects of the instrument, you're going to be working in natural scales, no matter what. You're going to be looking at octaves and fifths, open intervals, Pythagorean theory, you're going to find all of those. And then you're going to start what I do. Then I start micro tuning things. I start taking 20 cents sharp over here, 20 cents flat over here. So first you activate the instrument, and then through micro tuning, you create motion. So if everything is just perfectly aligned, you get this beautiful Hans-Jenny pattern of a single wave pattern. once you start introducing these beating patterns and frequencies of micro-tuned intervals, then you start to create motion. You start to create patterns that are non-linear because of the way that they're interacting with the mass of the water and the resonance of the instrument. And so that's kind of how I approach tuning with these instruments. There's always going to be an element of using just intonation intervals just by the nature of working with the physicality of an object. But each one is going to have a different characteristic. You know, this glass has some higher frequencies that ring out more than, for example, certainly the resin or the wood. And so that's allowed me to actually to work a little bit more with high frequencies, which don't often have enough, you could say, mass to move the water as much visually as lower frequencies do.
So what we just heard was a particular tuning which came about as a matter of hands-on experimentation, basically what works, but it's not some intellectual abstract. It is representing the physicality of the water and the vessel.
Exactly, yeah. It usually starts with this trusty SEM synthesizer over here. And because I have a knob and I can turn it and tune it and find what frequencies are activating the instrument, then start modulating, finding other instruments that can make interesting patterns together with it. And luckily this organ has a pitch wheel where I can actually correct the pitch so that the fundamental is actually matching the fundamental of that instrument. And this instrument also has magnets on the bottom, which are tunable. So I could create these really interesting beating patterns, things that are kind of in tune, not really in tune. You're like, but they create this motion. And of course the sound. Of course, I'm also influenced by the aesthetics of how the sounds feel.
Yeah. Do you find that certain kinds of vibratory inputs lead to predictable results? Like, is the instrument just taking you for a ride, or can you manage it and say, if I do this, this is the result I will see?
So yeah, through a little bit of trial and error, as you get to know the instrument, you start to learn. And as I start to compose for it, I start to see how it's reacting to things more linearly. Although, to be honest, even just a little bit less water than normal in that glass vessel will change the way that it reacts. I was like, last night, it was moving with this piece that I composed. It was moving really great. And then I was like, what changed to this morning? I was like, oh, right, I added a little bit, I guess, too much water. So it is very sensitive, but if you try to keep the mass of water the same, which is hard to do in such a small area of water, especially on these instruments as well, the area of water was even smaller. So that would be something that definitely changes. And of course, with the wood instrument, the weather, everything else about it changed its relationship to how it moved sound. The glass is a little bit more predictable as long as I can keep the mass of water right. I think next time I would probably measure out exactly how much water I put in, and then I'd get more predictable results.
Yeah. Are you inclined, or maybe disinclined, to go through an intellectual exercise like saying, this kind of set of frequency relationships creates this kind of patterns in the instrument? Is that a question you would ask yourself, or would it just be exploratory?
That's interesting. So in one of the pieces that I created, this fixed media piece, Recognition, I definitely was investigating it more at that scale. That I created at, I had access to this grand piano at the Brush Creek Arts Residency, And that's where I had this wooden instrument as well. And I was playing with, preparing the piano based upon the resonant frequencies of the, macrocymatic instrument, and composing with very specific intervals of how I was moving the sound. And this piece was also in black and white, so you could see the peaks and the troughs in the water very clearly. The patterns become these little, almost like calligraphy in the water, the drawing of the lines. And I would say that one is maybe the most scientific, and I'm sure that I had some frequency charts and stuff going on when I was creating that. I'm not sure if I have that right now.
Yeah, we all love being scientists and stuff, but I also really kind of love the idea of just treating it as entirely experientially rather than theoretically, and having it. Yeah. Now, there's this sort of tricky word for me, which is synesthesia, and as artists use it, as people that are into aesthetics use it, it has to do with cross relationships between different kinds of sensory input. And we see a lot of work lately. I actually just sort of had a recent inundation of people doing experiments involving sound, music, and light. Now, I have to confess, I often find that when you're looking at something and sort of saying the light, the idea is you're supposed to feel that the light also expresses what the music expresses, and I always think I don't really feel the connection. That is my honest response when I see these things sometimes. My attitude is a little bit different about the macrocymatic instrument for a couple of reasons, but what's your feeling about that? I mean, there's this long intellectual history of trying to interpret music as light or various other synesthetic mappings, including some sort of nonsense like this frequency corresponds to this color in some very specific way, which usually doesn't hold up given the fact that everybody who does a mapping does a different mapping from whoever else did it. Are you concerned with that intellectual history, or even forget about the history, just this question can you make a meaningful aesthetic mapping between music and visual patterns, and do you feel it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think that my approach to this is trying to base it off of a physical relationship. So not like I'm saying, oh, this color matches this frequency because that's what I feel, or the star Sirius told me, and therefore that's what we have. This is coming from the place of synesthesia, of actually physically translating waves from one medium to another. And there is always going to be some aesthetic choices that happen along the way. Why did I choose this color? And it's like, well, it has a nice amount of contrast so that you can see the waves, right? But also it has no feeling, and you can't separate the aesthetics of that as from the piece or how it ends up feeling. But for me, the desire to create a synesthetic experience is in order to draw the viewer into a space where they don't actually need to question the relationship, because it's not designed necessarily. It is coming from a physical basis, that the water is actually moving and you can see it moving. What makes it very interesting is how nonlinear that can be naturally, how naturally nonlinear, especially at the macrocymatic scale. And that's what I think creates something that can hold interest without it just being this linear aspect of, oh, it's this color, or it's this the frequency of the music is matching the frequencies of the light, shining, or for example, or strobing. It's actually a much deeper physical relationship that is how this, what is the basis of this, of the synesthetic experience.
Yeah. Okay. And you know, I have to say, watching the piece we all just saw, the Mirror of Light, I kind of appreciated your willingness to sort of take me by the hand and have patience to let me see what was happening. That, I mean, we've all just seen it. It's a spacious piece. The transitions are slow, and it really makes it inviting to actually study the relationships between sound and music. When things happen quickly, you don't always catch what's happening. You did me, thank you very much, the great favor of moving slowly between types of sounds and even harmonic relationships and things like that, in ways that allowed me to get into the observation of what changed and what moved. And it actually, it wasn't, for me, it wasn't merely an intellectual exercise. It really was pretty engaging to watch how these things happen. And so in that sense, it's very successful in a way that some other synesthetic experiments have not been so successful for me. And taking into account what you just said also, that we really are just watching a bunch of physical relationships and the interaction between these two phenomena.
Oh, that's wonderful. I'm really happy to hear that. And I think that when I'm working at this scale, there is a lot of the idea of slowing down in order to draw the viewer in is something that I'm conscious of as I'm working in this material. And so I'm really happy to hear that that was effective for you.
Good, good. Now, originally, when we invited you to be in the window gallery, we were talking about a live performance. This piece that we've just seen is what it is. It's not a live performance. What is the relationship between what's happened here and what a live performance might have been? If COVID hadn't come along, what would you have done? Would you have done something completely different, or would you have used the same vessel? And what would it felt like to be sitting immersed in the Center for New Music listening space, hearing and seeing this?
Well, there's a lot of what ifs in that one. I think that I probably would have chosen a slightly different vessel because of the scale of the wall that I wanted to project onto. So when I was originally conceiving of the piece, I was thinking of a larger vessel, primarily so that it would cast more light on that huge wall in the window gallery, and to be able to have just more surface area of water. Because I wanted it to have a little bit more of that that aspect of taking it out of the macro scale into the visible light scale. So I think that for one thing, it probably would have been a different vessel. And based upon how these instruments have been performed live before, it can vary. So one thing that is possible, let's say we did have a performance with this particular vessel, I could perform the exact same piece that you hear, but change the lighting in the camera live in order to create that, to create what you're seeing being also projected live onto a screen. So maybe on one side you see the waterways being reflected, and on another side you actually see what the macrocymatic scale would be. And I'm just making up a whole new piece now. That would be really fun. Gonna keep that in mind. But so sometimes I'll actually perform the audio as well. Sometimes I'll perform the camera. I haven't yet had the opportunity to do the live performance where I'm performing the sound as well as having somebody else do the camera work. But that would be another option that I would like to explore in the future. Especially, I mean, I wouldn't be using this organ live, that's for sure. That's not it. It was portable in the 70s, but it's not portable to me. So, you know, the idea of like what instruments would be performed in the live context, probably those crystal singing bowls behind me. Those would be a nice one to perform live. which is part of the piece as well. And synthesizer. I mean, a lot of the piece is based in improvisation, based in that exploration of how what I'm doing affects the sound, affects it at this micro scale. Like when I was performing those singing bowls, I was literally looking at this screen while I'm playing them, and I'm like, is that working? Is that good? Oh, what? Okay, how about if I crossfade this one in now? How's that changing it? So that could also be an aspect of what the performance would be like.
And as to use the word immersive, as an immersive experience, I'm sorry, putting that word in quotes, whatever it means. I mean, it would have felt really different, right? Being in the room with it.
I think so. Yeah, I think that there's always. I mean, I liked to in this piece. I thought it was fun to explore the idea of what the to let you see the vessel, like in the mirror of light. I let you see the vessel. I let you come in and out of this experience of looking at these water waves and thinking like, what are they? And then seeing the vessel and like making the connection. And that's something that in a fixed video piece is not taken for granted. Other fixed media pieces I've done with macrocymatic instruments, they never show you the vessel. They're just showing you the results of the water motion. So, but of course, if you're having the live experience, depending on how much of this is actually visible to you with the instrument, how visible the instrument is on stage or in this gallery space, you can already start to make those connections and conclusions for yourself. So if I'm doing something where I'm just shooting with the video, the amount of light, and obviously, of course, the size of that vessel, if I was using that, people wouldn't necessarily see as much in the immersive experience of to be able to put it together, but they'd still have the opportunity to walk up there, which you don't have in a video.
Yeah. Well, now we could go on and on with these things. This is endlessly fascinating, but we also have to think about the clock. So it's probably about time for us to draw to a close here. This has been wonderful, Marielle. And I want to thank you very, very much for agreeing to do this thing with the Window Gallery and for sitting with me today and letting people see this wonderful work. I hope that people will get to see your work in other contexts, including physical performances a lot coming in the future.
Thank you. I've definitely missed it. And this has been my big COVID art project in a way. And the evolution of the project through the COVID year has been very central and unique. And I'm really glad for the support of the Center for New Music and the Window Gallery to allow this to happen and allow it to change and to continue to support it with how, you know, the flexibility of you and the team there has been amazing. And so it was a journey. It was like many of us on our COVID year had many journeys, and this was one of mine. And so I'm really happy to share it with you, and thank you for the opportunity.
Our big pleasure, and thanks to our editor, Anne-Marie Cordero, and to the whole staff at the Window Gallery and the Center for New Music. Thank you very much, Marielle, and
thank
till
you.
soon.
All right.